When I started looking into the history of Jamaica, I noticed that these people were often referenced by name. Like there are several texts that specifically list out the names of the 21 families. And I am kind of wondering, when did we stop calling their names and why we were afraid to call their names? For example, in several of my videos, people have jumped into the comments to tell me to stop referencing them as the merchant class, to stop referring them as the elites, when that is how they are named in the history books. So the first text I'm going to read from is called Hegemony and Foreign Policy, the Dialectics of Marginalized and Global Forces in Jamaica. So Jamaica got its independence in 1962, and this chapter, The Making of Modern Jamaica, is looking at the ruling class in 1969. And it says, of these expatriate businessmen, 178 were born in Europe or North America, with the US and the UK as the largest sources. 8 were born in the Middle East, 4 in India, with 1 each from the Philippines, Mauritius, and Nigeria. The remainder were from the Caribbean. Some of the most powerful families of the ruling class, such as the Alexanders, Assenimes, Mahfoods, Chinsees, Bovels, Bicknells, Brahams, Brandons, Brants, Changs, Harts, Fletchers, Chens, Chinloys, Chinyes, Delissas, Henriques, Isaacs, Issas, Lace, Levi's, Marzukas, and of course, the Matalons are clearly of foreign, non-black backgrounds. Judging from photographs in the Registry of Power, that is Who's Jamaica 1969, it would be rather difficult to know that Jamaica is a predominantly black country. So let's go over to another book, Dependency and Socialism in the Modern Caribbean. And it says, much of the local economy was owned and controlled by a tightly knit group comprised of 21 families, including 5 of the most prominent members, the Assenimes, the Desnogeddis, the Harts, the Henriques, and the Matalons. This group of wealthy capitalists accounted for 125 of the 219 directorships in foreign enterprises registered in Jamaica and approximately 70% of the chairpersons of the various corporate boards. While Chinese, Syrians, Jews, Lebanese, and white Jamaicans had control of some of the companies, not one of these firms was actually owned by blacks, who represented 80% of the population at the time. Of the 219 directorships, only 6 were held by blacks, and of these, 2 were government appointments through joint ownership. So the third source I'm going to look at is Essays on Power and Change in Jamaica. And it says, it is the contention of this study that the concentration of power and control of the corporate economy lies in the hands of minority ethnic elites and is mainly dispersed through 21 families and their interest groups. The ascendancy of these groupings, Jews, local whites, Syrians, and Chinese, closely followed and in some ways anticipated the transition of the plantation state to independent nation. Closely allied with the colonial governments, the group's early genesis came from the plantation system, some owners of large plantations, others engaged in a tradition of import-export trading and ancillary commercial activities like insurance, while others pioneered early industry of soft consumer goods and some heavy engineering. Opportunities for advancement of their own economic interests were generally pursued more through chance than choice, but once seized were thoroughly exploited. The intermarried, usually arranged to keep family wealth intact, occupied important roles in major organizations of the state, enjoyed an unusual intimacy with the law and legal institutions, and played an important role in their development. With the island's independence in 1962, the situation remained unchanged. The logic, which united families, professionals, and financial interests, and occupation of important institutional hierarchical roles continued. 21 family groupings are easily identifiable as the major centers of power and account for 125 of the 219 existing directorships in the corporate economy and nearly 70% of the chairmen. Within this context, one can also talk of a supergroup, family groupings which are represented on a variety of corporations and share a large number of directorships. Asinimes, Desnoguedes, Hart, Henriquez, and Matalon can be considered supergroups, occupying 1 out of every 3 available directorships. More. The issue is further complicated by the extensive intermarriages between the 21 groupings. One finds that Asinime and Enriquez linked by marriage, and the Desnoguedes, Hart, and Enriquez are similarly linked. It is not difficult to conceive of the racial and economic exclusiveness of such relationships. Nearly half of the 53 corporate directors which make up the group of 21 families are Jews. Noticeably absent are blacks. Not one corporate firm is controlled by blacks, who represent 90% of the population. And of the 6 blacks on corporate boards, 2 were government appointed, the others providing a facelift. Intermarriage could be viewed as a means of extending corporate ownership, as a strategic instrument for linking the factors of production, land, skill, and capital, and thus retaining the power and influence of the ethnic groupings. And the last part I want to read, to me, is very important, and it says, what is the essence of the power of directing, superintending, and adjusting labor? In other words, what is the essence of the power of command and control? It is based on contract, where the owner of capital and property imposes his will upon the wage owner. Such an imposition is a social necessity predicated upon the capitalist system and its mature child, the corporate economy. For in order to stabilize control of the future, private persons had to use the greater machinery of the state to govern their personal law, so that the institution of property, the power of social distribution of goods, the development of labor regulations, and the retention of a favorable judicial climate were functions of the force of law and potentially useful to a ruling elite. None of this is new information. Their names used to be published regularly. They were referenced in many of these historical texts as the ruling class, as the elite, as the merchant class. But because these people are also the ones who own and have access to mainstream media, they have managed to change the narrative. And the whole whitewashing of out of many, one people, we are all Jamaicans and none is better than the other. And when we know that that is not true, it has set us up in a path where we have regular working class people coming on social media and in other spaces defending the very people who have masterfully set a structure to keep them underfoot. These people have had a leg up forever, and they have masterfully been able to convince regular ordinary Jamaicans that they're somehow the good guys. And this is not to cast aspersions as to say these people are somehow nefarious in their business dealings. What I'm saying is we first need to acknowledge that there is a Jamaican elite, and the members of this elite class have to publicly acknowledge what role they may have had in contributing to the social and economic inequities that currently exist on the island. You can't have a situation where people have from birth, from the plantation system, from colonial times, have been set up for success where others have been set up for failure, creating this vast gap in wealth and in the ability to create and access wealth and not take some responsibility for it and not at least acknowledge it. That's just my point.